10 years for sure. But, I don't play hockey myself, but it seems that the level of customization in skates themselves is just getting higher and higher. So you basically have it's almost like a custom orthopedic shoe with
Well,
a
it is
blade
in a
on the
way,
end.
right? I mean, for years and years, people are using these really awkward tools to accomplish something that's very, very precise, right? So I would say, customization being put more in the hands of the individual, like this is something that people know more about how they can um, get these kind of things customized. So, there's a lot of rabbit holes you can go down, I think, for both ski, snowboard, skate, in terms of getting the right fit and what you can do to make that appropriate. And I mean, as clinicians, we've got to try to stay ahead of that curve. So we can come at it from an understanding of the biomechanics and what's happening within the internal forces, and then we can work together with the ski shops and the skate shops, how that works. So yeah. Well, it's 2 minutes after. Should we get going, or did you want to wait another minute for another person or two to join?
I think we had Tanya 10 RSVP for this. Is that right?
I think we added another one last night, so there was 11, but then one declined, so we're probably back down to 10, yes.
Okay, sure. Well, yeah, if you want to sort of slowly begin your preamble, Alex, I think everybody here likely might know who you are, but if not, then it's worth just giving a brief introduction of Alex Raynor, who's overseeing the technical services, works closely with Ben Boyer, the manager of Kiwi Orthotic services. We have Tanya Marsman here, who's been managing customer service and client relations for Kiwi. Emails will likely come from Tanya. But Alex is certainly, along with Ben, our resident expert when it comes to the field of orthotics, including AFOs, custom orthopedic footwear, and the like. And so it's great getting an opportunity to just share tidbits from this knowledge base with respect to ordering behavior and a seasonal nature, which is why we want to do these seminars, so that the people in the KOS group can understand how to best take advantage of our order form and the services that we provide. So Alex, with that sort of bought us a couple more minutes here, so why don't you get started, and looking forward to hearing learning all about winter footwear and how we can take advantage of the product mix at Kiwi in that respect.
Perfect. Yeah, and as I was kind of rambling a little bit before, a big part of today is going to be taking a look at it more from sort of the biomechanical perspective and understanding how these devices can help interact and improve fit and performance and all these other things. So as Michael said, I'm the technical services manager at KOS. So both me and Ben sort of help to translate and understand and interpret a lot of the orders that get sent in, both new and adjustments. And so anything that requires fixing and a little bit more technical know-how when it comes to orthotic design, that's comes to myself and Ben. So I have been a pedorthist for just over a decade now, and so I have seen quite a few different situations. Living in Vancouver, we see a lot of different sport-specific athletes coming in. I fit lots of ski orthotics and skate orthotics over the years, and I've seen lots of different complaints and troubles and situations trying to get really flat feet in there and really supinated or really caved feet. So it's nice to keep my head in the game, so to speak. I still see a few clinical days a week, every week. So making sure that I'm still in the game, as it were, with clinical work. So without further ado, I'm going to just share my screen, and I've got a few slides prepared, and then we'll have a few minutes afterwards for some Q&A, and I'll try to be a bit more I'll try to keep a bit more of an eye on the time than I did last time. I know we went a bit over, so I'll try to keep it tight, and then this can be looked at afterwards for people that aren't able to make it today.
Exactly. We have Christmas shopping and wrapping to do.
Exactly.
It's so much.
All right. Can people see the screen there, or is it coming up?
Looks good.
All right, perfect. All right, so the sport-specific orthotic design, winter edition. So I would keep the focus a little bit more on just winter-related sports today, as that's what most people are doing at the moment. So, in terms of orthotic for sport, we've got a lot of different situations that need accommodation. So as soon as someone brings up, oh, I'm an avid skier, an avid hockey player, or I'm a figure skater, my mind starts going right away to the different biomechanical needs for these things. And especially so if those situations, those sports are causing pain, if they're say normally able to do it, but they're getting some sort of injury or dysfunction, and it's limiting their ability to enjoy or participate in that sport. Or more from the situation of kids and teenagers, if they are going through puberty or they are going through development and they want to participate in something, but they are getting limited by some physical factor in their biology. So, when we look at why recommending a sport-specific orthotic, there's a lot of reasons to offer these. Obviously, some medical and some non-medical, right? To improve fit and performance. This is why skate and ski shops exist and have the amount of technical know-how that they often do, so that they are often, like cobblers, they are going in and looking at blade alignment and position on the ski and the snowboard. They are looking at how to wedge the foot in certain ways. So a lot of ski and skate shop technicians often become sort of pseudo pedorthists in that regard and have a very good knowledge base. So if you are not familiar with any of the sports that your patients are doing, I would recommend, find a local shop, or next time you're in a town that has a local shop, go in and ask some questions, because it's super, super valuable to get sort of that insider knowledge. I have skated and skied and done a little bit of really unsuccessful snowboarding in the past, but by no means am I an expert on those sports. And so I kind of kowtow to the experts for all the technicalities of that. And as I was saying, I come at it with a view of the biomechanics. I look at what forces are we generating within our own body to achieve a goal, right? So some of the different sport-specific considerations that we have to take a look at, well, there's different biomechanical needs. There's a huge difference between the static isometric type of sports with regards to foot mechanics versus dynamic ones, right? The sports like skating and hockey, skiing, snowboarding, you are locking the foot into this one position and trying to generate very specific types of leverage and force with that. And that is hugely different to where you're in a soccer cleat, or you're in a basketball shoe, and you are trying to generate torsion and traction, and you're going through lots of different motions within the foot. Hugely different. Some of the other things we have to be aware of as well, the width and the volume of the footwear is a huge one. We have to accomplish a certain job with the devices that we're creating, and we're given a very small space to work in sometimes. And it means that millimeters and halves of millimeters can start to make more of a difference than they normally would, right? Oh, sorry. The other quick couple things there, durability, and not quite as much a big deal with what we'll be talking about today, but still worthwhile to mention. Especially it comes into more field and court sports with the amount of shear forces that are involved, and same thing for the grip and the traction. So we won't touch on as much on those ones today. Okay. So everybody loves a slide with some big blocks of text in it. But essentially what I was saying, you know, the static sports, the things that we'll kind of focus on today, sports that really lock your foot in place versus the ones that allow your foot and depend on your foot to be able to move and create shock absorption. As I was saying, it's important to know the forces and motions within each sport. You know, how are the sports different? How do you generate power and leverage with your foot in a sport? You know, with skates and skis, you are using the foot locked in that position, and it becomes an extension of your leg. The boot and the blade or the ski become part of your leg. And how do you lock that foot in and secure it so that you can have this lossless transition of power through the body into the ground? You know, so you want to consider all these little things as you're designing the orthotic, and as you're asking questions, as you're listening to the patient. Getting even more granular to that, you know, if you're talking hockey, for instance, just as an example, how do the different positions affect the forces? Well, you're going to make slightly a different design, or there'll be different considerations for a forward versus a goalie, right? The amount of time that you spend as a goalie with the foot in a or the leg in a very valgus position can mean that a more aggressive orthotic is just uncomfortable, right? Because the amount of just static time that you're spending in that position versus a forward, you know, needs a lot of speed and power, and will be moving quite quickly. The other part here is, you know, well, what does that mean for orthotic design? You know, in general, as a typical design, a firmer device is going to transfer power more directly, right? You might not make a really rigid device for everyday use. That may feel uncomfortable, but when you're talking about locking the foot into this cage of a skate or a ski boot, you don't want a huge amount of flexibility, because any excess movement is going to mean loss of that power and that control. Whereas more flexible devices will be helpful for dampening forces and creating more shock absorption. So you're looking at the typically more dynamic sports, soccer and lacrosse and rugby and basketball, all those things. Right. So kind of dialing in on some of these winter sports, you know, obviously these are sports that include these rigid this rigid footwear. As I was saying, it's a extension of your leg, right? Which means that the natural ability of the foot to be able to flex and create shock absorption and to be able to bend through that sagittal plane becomes almost a liability, right? We don't want those motions to occur, right? We still want to create force and generate power through the leg and the foot, but any movement within that shoe often ends up being wasted, right? Because the foot's not going forward, it's not moving through its natural cycle. You know, one of the biggest complaints I hear from a lot of skiers, especially overpronated skiers, is cramping, right? They're locked into the ski, the foot's collapsing on the inside, and those muscles within the foot are having to try to contract to create a rigid, stiff lever, and often it's too much for them. And so what happens when a muscle contracts so hard that it can't accomplish its task? Well, it'll fatigue, it'll cramp, it'll get strained. And this is a huge limitation on a lot of overpronated people. You don't even have to be that overpronated to have this issue in ski boot. It just has to not fit amazingly, and you're just not getting the leverage that you need. So the foot overworks. So, you know, as I was saying, the excess motion, improper alignment, any incomplete contact. So if your foot just does not match the footwear that it's in, especially for these extensions of your leg, that's really going to create inefficiency, right? just referring to the picture here, when you see someone, tied into a figure skate, there's a reason that figure skates are very, very different from hockey skates. The types of motions, the acrobatic feats that they have to accomplish. It depends on a very, very good fit with the skate. You need that complete contact. And that's one of the things that we can help with an orthotic quite a bit. So just in my other point here, as much as we recommend a lot of these orthotic devices, it has to be said that if people aren't doing strengthening exercises, intrinsic foot exercises, manual therapies, stretching, massage, those are huge. And orthotics don't work in a vacuum. If the muscles are weak on the orthotic, then the orthotic's not going to function as well as it can, right? So orthotics don't replace muscle activity; they accentuate it, and they can empower it. But if muscles are just not working, then you're still not going to have a good outcome. So knowing some intrinsic foot exercises to pass along is really essential. Foot doming, short foot, all those sort of things. All right. And getting into the meat of it here, so orthotic intervention, sort of generic platitudes that I often give to people as well. It can realign joint positions and redistribute plantar forces. But it is very important that people understand that that is what we're trying to do, and never more so in these kind of footwears, in this kind of footwear. Typically, when you're putting the orthotic in to these shoes, you're looking at something that is either semi-rigid or rigid, and that doesn't mean it has to be either a hard shell or a soft shell, like a graphite or poly versus a foam device. You can still get a semi-rigid device with a foam, EVA foam or rigid plastas out. We'll talk about that in a second. But you're looking for that semi-rigid or rigid device with a slimmer profile that is going to have a really flush fit to that type of footwear, right? You're also having to consider how much correction, because you can typically get a little bit more aggressive with the amount of posting or the angle that you put in these. But as I mentioned, with certain positions like hockey goalies, you have to be considerate of how much force or how much pressure you're applying to the peak of the MLA, right? If the foot's sensitive there, if they are a big heavy guy or gal, then that can apply a lot of discomfort in certain situations. So, that's sort of on average what you're looking for. And when we get into specific designs, you'll see on the catalog that we have and on our templates, there's some good starting points, but these are starting points, that goes with all the designs that we use. It's really important to know how you're able to customize these for individual patients, because you may start with the hockey skate design and then completely alter every bit of it. But it's there as a starting point, right? So your skate design, we design these templates so that they are the most effective for the majority of people, right, without alteration. And as I was saying, this is a low profile shell. It's typically a semi-rigid nature, especially when you're locking that into a skate. It doesn't allow for the motion of the shell to move very much if it's properly fitted and flush. So even if that graphite is a semi-flexible graphite, if they have a medium or a higher arch and it's tightly fitted into the skate, well, that orthotic's not moving, right? So it becomes a more rigid device as it gets put into the footwear. We often will put on the medial hindfoot posting that comes default, so that you can add a few more degrees of varus without adding any extra actual volume to the heel. The pull string comes default as well. Some people like these, some people hate them, so you can't just say no string on there if you prefer not having it on. And then, as with a lot of our designs these days, there's that bottom cover of Duracell on there. Now, we'll talk in a minute here about different materials, but as I said, this is a starting point. What I've found over the years is that with a lot of skating designs, it really depends on the individual foot, and you can use these harder shells. I often go to a polypropylene polypro direct with skates to be able to get still the same rigidity, but if they do overpronate quite heavily, or if they're a goalie, there is a slight amount more flex to the polypropylene on average than the graphite. And then to go further with that, if they have a little bit more sensitivity, especially if they're younger, if they're going through puberty, they might be gaining 50 pounds within a year, or growing 6 inches. And the same orthotic device might, when it was comfortable when they were 5 foot and 100 pounds, might be really uncomfortable when they're now 150 pounds and 5'6". So going to more of a softer shell, a foam-based design with either rigid plastic or EVA can be quite effective as well. And there's some things that we can do with that are quite cool. So that's sort of the skate template, which you are probably familiar with. This is one of the ones that didn't really change moving to the new version of the order form. The next one, of course, ski snowboard design. We're looking at, with the ski snowboard design, starting with a default of an EVA shell, and this is an EVA of a 55 durometer, which just means it's that firmer type of foam. It's not going to have a lot of give to it under a light amount of pressure. However, one of the things to be aware of when you're skiing and snowboarding, especially downhill, is you could be rocketing down that hill at 60 miles an hour, and the amount of force that can be generated against your arch into the orthotic can be huge. It can multiply, 5 or 7 times your body weight, and you don't necessarily want a rigid device pressing into the foot, and that can cause some irritation. So we tend to start with more of an EVA foam, which under 100, 200 pounds of pressure is not going to compress very much. But start applying a lot more force, and you're going to want a little bit more give to that. That is to say, just like with ski boots, if you are going to a higher level of performance in skiing, well, you want more rigidity. That's true of the boot. It's true of the orthotic as well. So I've done some more rigid designs with polypro or graphite for some ski athletes. But I've also had people that have tried those and had some discomfort and bruising or blistering with those devices. So you really have to pay attention to what each individual has experienced and what's been comfortable, and then make adjustments as needed. So the ski template, as you can see here, is you might have experienced as well in the past. We use a low profile EVA shell. So there's typically no arch fill that's getting put into this because of how low volume it is. It doesn't usually need an extra piece going in to bolster that arch. The fit in the shell of the ski boot or the snowboard boot often helps create a lot of contact there. And again, too much pressure in the arch in these situations can cause some discomfort, right? You'll notice on a lot of our sport orthotics, the general sport, the cleat, even the hockey skate one, we use more of a closed cell foam top cover, and we'll touch on top covers later. But with ski boots, it is almost impossible to get on with that cover. So we typically recommend the Ultra Suede, which I know it's gray in the picture here, is now black, is the main Ultra Suede that we use. But the Ultra Suede makes it a lot easier to put your skis on. So just a little note on that. All right, so hard shell versus soft shell. I've talked a little bit to this already, but when we're looking at the amount of balance and control that you get in a hockey skate, it's really important to have that really solid fit. And you can get that with a graphite or poly shell, but you can also get that with what we might term a soft shell, but can actually still be quite hard when you press against it, when it's fitted into the skate properly. So we'll often use things like more rigid plastisode is probably the one I use more often for skates because of volume concerns. The rigid black plastisode, if you haven't seen it before, comes default on our running template in the updated catalog. And it's a foam that is very, very lightweight, is very nice for creating rigidity and shape in a low volume, but it's still a foam. And so under high amounts of pressure, it's going to add a little bit of flexibility. And most importantly, when you are landing on hard surfaces, so if you have a figure skater, if you have, somebody who's skiing or snowboarding in a park regularly and is jumping and doing a lot of tricks on the mountain, having that extra shock absorption when they land is really, really good because it helps prevent a lot of irritation and strain up through the chain of the knees and the hips. So instead of having that rigid device, having that rigid plastisode, that foam material can really, really help. And all it really takes when you're ordering is just some more specific measurements, and which I'm going to talk about in a second here is something that we try to encourage in any case with these sort of things. So the foam materials for these sport-specific devices are something that we've been trying to encourage a lot over the last couple of years because especially for very, very specific shapes of skates like figure skating, we have to accommodate a certain pitch in the shoe or sorry, a pitch in the figure skate. And foams do that a lot better than rigid devices like graphite or polypro. So a little plug for the rigid plastisode. And when you're looking at ordering these, when you're looking at the defaults, you can just start with the running design. That starts with a default shell of rigid plastisode, and you can then kind of alter and change things as you go through. So a very, very good material for this kind of purpose. So how to order and have it actually fit in the shoe, right? And this is a big part that comes into when you don't have a lab on site. It can be a little intimidating, right? If something does not fit right when it arrives, there's not much you can do if you don't have a grinding wheel or a good pair of scissors on hand, and you may have to send that back to us to have it adjusted. So to avoid some of those things, to avoid that kind of back and forth, the more accurate measurements you can give us when you send in the order, the better the results can be, right? So have the patient bring in their footwear. If they don't have it during that initial assessment, encourage them to come back in a day or two or a couple of days and bring in the skate or the ski boot, take out the liner and put it on a piece of paper, trace it, take some measurements, write down the measurements and everything on there. The more measurements we get, the better, the more accurate the orthotic fit's going to be. So you can just pop it right in and away she goes. So there's sort of a picture here of someone that sent us some insole tracings. These look way too wide to be for a skate or a ski boot, but they give you the right idea. So give us some measurements, give us some scales, and then you can just email it along to us with the patient name. So some special considerations. How are we doing for time? All right, just about to wrap up here. So a couple quick little things when we get into specifics of certain issues. Cross-country skiing, we've been when I've been talking about skiing and snowboarding, I've been mostly kind of considering downhill. But when we talk about things like cross-country, backcountry touring, things like that, those motions are very different. There's a lot more metatarsal loading. And so, I see a lot more cross-country skiers that get metatarsalgia, pain through their bunions, things like that. So consider those metatarsal reliefs and supports as needed. It's something that needs a bit more consideration versus the just downhill crowd. Calf tightness, ankle limitation. I see a lot of the people in ski shops doing this. Is not often needed as much or is tolerated as much in skates, but can sometimes help if you have somebody with an equinus or a limitation through that ankle. just putting a small lift of 3 or 6 millimeters, either separate or attached onto the orthotic, can just increase the leverage. You're just putting the ankle joint into a little bit of plantar flexion. You're sort of priming those joints for better mechanical effectiveness, right? Fun times with exostoses. So, anytime that there's a buildup of calcium or bone anywhere in the foot that does not fit with the regular rigid footwear, punch outs. Punch outs, a lot of the footwear that you'll see has a thermomoldable capacity and can be adjusted and loosened as needed in some really sensitive areas. So we don't typically do that in our local clinics, but because we don't have the tools for it. But as you can kind of see the picture on the right here, the punch out tools are pretty simple, and you just need to kind of mark where you need the relief, bring it in, and that can be good for accessory naviculars is a big one with skates. If someone is overpronating, has an accessory navicular, it just digs in, and I've seen some ulcers created from that. Same thing with bunions. A lot of people with bunions feel like they can't do these sports, and they may not know that this is an option, right? This is one of the levels of customization that Michael alluded to earlier, that we can use our local shops to be able to do these punch outs. They can adjust blade alignment if you need to adjust it a slight, a quarter inch to the right or the left to help increase your leverage on a skate. There's a lot of little things that can be done. So as I was saying, really, really worthwhile talking to those people at your pro shops. If you need extra cushioning, I see this a lot with kids, especially that are overpronating inside of skates or ski boots, and they need, or soccer cleats as well, and they need a bit of extra cushion and control over that medial arch. But you can't put a rigid flare in those devices. So how do you help with that? Well, you can add a soft flare. It looks a little funny, but it looks like a little wing on the orthotic. We just put a semicircle of PPT and cover over top of that. And then when that goes in the skate, it wraps up and around the side of the foot to help prevent blisters, help control the arch a little bit more, because we're relying on the rigidity of the skate or the boot to help provide more support there. But it's still soft, it's still comfortable. So again, really good for accessory naviculars and that kind of issue. And the last part is any plantar relief areas. So as you may or may not do regularly with other patients and other orthotic designs, if someone has a pressure point, well, especially if it's under a contact point like the ball of the foot, the heel, somewhere that's pressing against the orthotic or the shoe, we'll mark it on the foot. Mark where you want that relief area. Let us know what material you want it cut out of in the orthotic. There's not usually a lot of extra material to use for this type of thing, but it's something that can certainly be done. So let us know the issues, and we'll try to accommodate as best as we can. And the last note here is just on top covers. This decision of what to put on top of the orthotic is going to be a conversation. You're going to want to take a couple of different factors, and this goes for every orthotic design. You can't get every quality into a top cover. I was having this conversation with a colleague on Teams, and we had a couple people chime in, but it was essentially someone was looking for a cover that provided good cushion, good grip and traction, but was also breathable and durable. And I'm like, well, that material doesn't exist yet. Hopefully, eventually. But for now, we have to kind of pick and choose what are the most important priorities. As I said earlier, getting on ski boots. If you can't get on the ski boot, you can't go skiing. So I don't put Fire Swirl EVA on or ski orthotics. It was originally part of that old design, but what happened is people put those in ski boots, and yeah, when you get it on, it provided amazing traction. But a lot of people just couldn't get the foot in because it would grab onto your sock and it wouldn't allow you to slide in. So Ultra Suede is kind of the go-to for that because it has that little bit of grip. It's really, really thin and is just comfortable. So That one, ecstatic, is used a little bit less frequently, but still is popular. It provides that sort of texture. Some people love the proprioceptive feedback that they get from ecstatic fabric, or IMS as it's otherwise known. It's more breathable. It does sometimes have a bit of temperamental adhesion, so sometimes can come unglued if there's a lot of shear force or there's a lot of moisture buildup, but is a great material as well. And then the closed cell foams, and this is a great thing to use for hockey skates. They come with that blue podiamic on it, but you can always change that to one of the other closed cell foams and they'll behave very similar to that. So that's most of what I had to do. I think I kept a little bit better to time, but we have a few minutes left if anybody has any questions. You can pop them in the chat if you'd like, or...
Alex, so there's a question there from Alicia. I think that's a good one as far as taking advantage of technology that's available to us in the clinic. Not everyone might be seeing the chat right now. And there's I think a good response from Ben there that may not be entirely intuitive for most people regarding using a scanner to scan the insole of a boot or skate to sort of leverage that digital precision, so to speak. But perhaps if you can speak to that.
Sure, and I think part of it comes down to the software. You know, the software that we use to interpret the foot scans, they do allow us to give us those measurements, but it takes a little bit of processing before we can receive those measurements. So it is a little bit of a roundabout to get to those measurements if you scan in the insole. But if you've got a ruler or a tape measure handy, it's a lot easier to just take a quick tracing, take that measurement and just shoot a picture and send it to us. And then that gives us a scale. It gives us the precise measurement right away. And it also gives us a number to refer back to. So if for some reason, you know, you receive something that doesn't look right or it doesn't fit the shoe, well, we can refer back to these numbers and say like, hey, well, this is the measurement that you gave us. Or, oh, look, it doesn't match the measurement you gave us.
So the idea here is taking a photo of the tracing and including in that photo the ruler,
the scale,
or a measure, so that the team can interpret the scale. That's super important.
Exactly. So either taking a picture with the ruler in it or the tape measure, or taking it, writing down the measurement, writing down the line and the measurement beside it, so we know exactly the length of that line. Because sometimes pictures and scans don't scale exactly. So as long as we know what your measurement looks like, we can then interpret that.
Alicia is also asking regarding a company that might take special considerations for feet that are sort of outside of normal limits, like might have a club foot or forefoot adductus. Do you know of anyone that boot company that we could refer to that is able to essentially make custom-made ski boots?
I don't off the top of my head. It's certainly something I can ask around and look into. I know I've had patients that have had a lot of trouble with this before, and the best solution that they've gotten to is getting as close a fit as they can with the boots, having them sort of customized as close as they can, and then having them further customized through punch outs and heel lifts, especially with clubfoot. I mean, you have to treat it like any other foot and just say, okay, well, here's the position, here's the shape that I have to accommodate. What are the physical constraints of that, and how much of an angle do I have to put in? Obviously, we can't chop and screw the entire shape of the ski boot, but there are some things that can be done internally, and a lot of it is going to be talking with your local ski shops and seeing what can be done. But no, unfortunately, I can't think of a specific company that would be able to make it from scratch. That was sort of the question.
That's certainly a unique skill, because it would already custom footwear is difficult to find, and there's not a large number of suppliers in that space. So custom orthopedic ski boot makers is
I don't think it's something that Johan touches. So.
Because it may not it may interfere with the function of the ski boot and the binding, And so there's that consideration as well that
Well,
may just
and
make
that's
that
the
a
thing.
starter.
You wouldn't really be able to change the base of the ski boot. And same thing with skates. I mean, you'd have to have custom made blades too, right?
Yeah, I mean, anything's possible. Considering, you know, the limits of human ingenuity, but
Mhm.
it certainly is a specialized skill. I had just a question that the audience might appreciate. So in those contexts about those boots where you are dealing with such a closed environment, a rigid environment, do you change how you accommodate metatarsal pads or forefoot supports for individuals that might present with forefoot pain, metatarsalgia, Morton's neuroma, and you're wanting to accommodate that, but also by adding those pads, it's adding volume to the shoe. Do you change your approach at all when you're
I
using
certainly
those
do.
pieces?
And especially, you know, in a lot of these shoes, ski boots, especially because of the closures, you have to consider the dorsal pressure
Yeah,
is quite a bit higher than in a regular walking shoe or running shoe or work boot. Depending on how tightly people are doing up those bindings, you can increase a lot of pressure there. So with a lot of people, I don't even put in the met pads and rely on the longitudinal arch support. Or if they have a medium or a high met pad in their daily orthotic, I'll go down to a low. Um, uh, and see how they function with that for a while before I raise it up any higher, because it is a lot of a higher pressure situation, both from just the activity and from the dorsal pressure of the device of the
sure.
footwear.
Good thoughts. Good
But
thoughts.
as I
So
said, you know, with cross country, with touring, things like where you're flexing up and rising up the heel, you're loading a lot of pressure onto that forefoot. I get a lot of people that just their forefeet go numb as soon as they start touring, and you have to often accommodate for that with some kind of metatarsal filming.
right, interesting. Okay. Any other questions for Alex from the audience? On the topic of winter footwear, winter orthotics for winter uh, boots and footwear in particular. A lot of times these require special considerations from the standpoint of orthotic designs, because a lot of these designs require changes in the breadth or the width of the shell itself. So certainly it's an opportunity for foot care providers to encourage additional pairs from their patients or clients. And because there's just a necessity, a physical necessity to have a different design in those types of boots that they can add value to. So
Yeah. You know, we have to consider a part of the service that we provide as clinicians is just improving quality of life, and you know, the capacity of to enjoy sport is huge, right? It is a big part of our culture and society, and if you can't participate in those things, it can really limit, you know, how much your enjoyment of life can be. So that's what we're here to do, is to try to break down those limitations and really increase people's capacities, right? So yeah, I think that's a good place to
perfect. Well,
leave it,
this
if
has been
unless
great.
there's any other questions.
Why don't we call it there then, Alex? It's great sharing your knowledge here with the group and the team. Thanks everyone for attending. Hope you learned some of the tidbits and can carry that forward to your patients. Otherwise, all the best for the holidays. Everyone stay safe and warm, and we'll see you at our next seminar. Enjoy the rest of your Friday, everyone. Bye-bye now.
Thanks, everybody.